I've entitled this Justified Revenge. You ever see someone act out on revenge, or maybe yourself and you felt justified doing it? We're going to see an example today of a situation we may say, I can understand why they believe it was okay to do what they did. But I want to begin with a couple little illustrations. A very short one was Chicago Cubs outfielder Andre Dawson paid $1,000 fine for disputing a strike called by the umpire Joe West. On the memo line on his check, Dawson wrote, "Donation for the blind." Do you see that? How you want to get that the last second revenge in there? Here's another true story, actually. When he was an attorney, Abraham Lincoln was once approached by a man who passionately insisted on bringing a suit for $2.50 against an impoverished debtor. Lincoln tried to discourage him, but the man was bent on revenge. When he saw the man would not be put off, Lincoln agreed to take the case and asked for a legal fee of $10, which the plaintiff paid. Now listen to this part. Lincoln then gave half the money to the defendant, who willingly confessed to the debt and paid the $2.50. But even more amazing, here's what sums it up. The more amazing thing, Lincoln's and his ingenious settlement, was the fact that the irate plaintiff was satisfied with it. He just wanted his revenge. The guy that got accused actually made $2.50 out of it. But the guy that wanted revenge, isn't it amazing how revenge works? It makes us do dumb things. Revenge, could you say that revenge is an evil thing? It makes us feel, it makes us act in horrible ways. Revenge makes you feel horrible. Of course, the person you take revenge on, even so, but yourself, anger, hatred, just that hatred inside you. That story about Lincoln, that's an amazing one. The guy just wanted that revenge, and when he felt he had it, he was good. But up to that point, can you imagine being that guy? He stole from me. He owes me $2.50. You can't even buy a Happy Meal for that today, can you? Tonight we're going to see something horrific that happens to this young girl, and she's approximately 15 to 16 years old. This young girl has many brothers, many older brothers. That's probably a better way to emphasize it. She had many older brothers that these brothers respond to this evil and wicked thing that was done to their sister, with revenge. And they do with what they consider justified revenge. They feel like they're justified. And when you hear what they do, more wicked than what happened to their sister, but they felt it was justified. I think we see that all over the world. We do something that's extremely wicked, but we can justify it. Does it make it right? Just because you can justify it doesn't mean that it's right before God. But we're also going to see a father who was part of the problem. He was silent. He didn't get upset. He didn't get excited. But one main thing that I noticed is that he didn't share some wisdom and guidance for his sons, knowing that his sons are going to be upset. Because in that culture, the sons are kind of the ones that protect the sisters, which we kind of do that in our society too, don't we? I mean, we protect them. But yet he didn't say anything. But the most important thing that I notice, and hopefully that you see also, is no one seeks the greatest wisdom available, the wisdom of God. Nowhere in this chapter do we see them seeking God's wisdom. Can we not say we see that in our own lives? And many times we do so many things, many wrong things, but we neglect or we seek God when it's too late. We seek Him like the spare tire, right? Remember the analogy about the spare tire? I love the analogy about the spare tire because when I say it, you guys all wonder. You probably think, you guys know if your spare tire has actually got air in it, or do you even have one? And when you're in church tonight, you're like, I should check that. But guess what? You don't, right? So you wonder, is my spare tire even there? That's the way we treat God. We'll only look for Him many times, not all of us, when we're in trouble. So let's go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 34, and I want to look at verses 1 through 4 to begin. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had been born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the ruler of the area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." There's so much wrong with that. So much. But I want to begin by, it appears as I went back through Genesis, it's kind of neat as we went through this, Dinah seems to be the only daughter of Jacob. And she's the daughter of Jacob and Leah. And that was actually the last child that Leah had. She was believed to be around 15 or 16 years old. But it begins with being at that age, they need some guidance. You can guess and wonder, why was she going out by herself? Maybe they're lenient, or she went where she wasn't supposed to go. It doesn't matter. At that age, they do need guidance. Not just girls. Any teenager at that age needs guidance. So she goes out into a pagan land to visit the pagan women. Now, I'm not so sure about that, because you think she had all these brothers, right? But there were slaves, there were servants, I should say. They had their own kids. There had to be other girls there. So maybe it wasn't just the girls that she was going out to see, but all that's conjecture. You have this picture where you don't know. Because I don't want to get on the path you think many times they blame the victim. That's not what I'm saying. So she went out to see these pagan women. These women were Hivites. They were descendants. Here's what's interesting. The Hivites were descendants of Canaan, son of Ham, son of Noah. So these are a pagan people that serve many gods, right? And they lacked godly morality. Now, there's some morality in the world, but there's godly morality. They lack that, as we see in this situation. So a simple application at the very beginning here is, it's not wise to mingle among worldly people checking out the evil things they do just because of curiosity. Many times we hear things that the world's doing that we know is wicked, but it's so beyond belief we need to go check it out ourselves. That's not wise. Have you ever heard of things and you're thinking, that sounds pretty messed up, I better go check it out? It's not a good idea. Back in this time, unattached females in that day, in that society, in that culture, were considered fair game. We actually see some of that still going on in the Middle East, don't we? A lot of the traditions, if you really want to study history, that what happened back in those times of their culture, I think a lot of it still hasn't changed much over there. So if they were out by themselves, they were considered fair game. Now, according to Josephus, the historical writer, he said that she had been attending a festival. So now we see, really, she sees this festival goes on. She wants to go check it out. But it's highly probable, he says, that she had been often and freely mixing into the society. So really it wasn't a one-time thing. That she'd been going out there, and he says, in the society of the place, and that she, being a simple, inexperienced, and vain young woman, had been flattered by the attention of this ruler's son. This is from Josephus as he recorded this historical facts. And there must have been times, he says, and opportunities of acquaintance to produce the strong attachment that Shechem had for her. As we see it, he had this strong, he calls it love for her. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's pretty messed up. Shechem is the son of a Hivite ruler of the city. He raped Dinah. And then he says he fell desperately in love with his victim and comforted her with a marriage proposal. So he rapes her, and then he says, I love you. And here's what's really messed up. He then asks his father to make the marriage arrangements. So Shechem goes to his dad, Hamor, and he says, hey, this woman, I want her for my wife. He probably told her the whole story. I slept with her, I forced myself upon her. And in that society, it didn't matter. But as I was studying this, what we need to do instead of just reading this, I want you guys to place yourself in the emotional situation. Because I realize sometimes the way we read the Bible, we look at it and say, man, that is messed up. We're going to look at these sons of Jacob and say, man, that's a bad thing that they did. That's an evil thing. But think about, put yourself in their mindset. Older brothers, someone rapes their sister. What would that cause you to do? I mean, you'd be enraged. So we need to be, in a sense, prepared for the wickedness of the world. We need to be spiritually strong, because emotions can control our lives. When things like that happen, how hard would it be to control yourself? Very hard. So he asks his father, hey, make these marriage arrangements for me. See, what a way to show his love for her. He rapes her and then he says, I love you. That's why I raped you. But we see that today, don't we? We see this whacked out thinking. We see some of the same immoral actions today. I don't think it's love. Do you guys think it's love? It's more like lust and what I want her to do for me. What I can basically use her for his own pleasure, basically. So when we look at Shechem's request to his father, then his father's response, look at the father. Here's his example. Shechem tells his father what he's done, what he wants him to do, and his response is he goes and does it. So basically, he condones it. In other words, he sees nothing wrong with what he's done. I look at him, they call him, in some translations, he calls him a prince of that city, that area. So he's a prince, and in essence, is used to getting what he wants, right? But it also illustrates us the low standard of morality among the Canaanites. And you see it through the Bible. They didn't have morality. They worshiped many gods, and many of the gods they worshipped, immorality was mixed within it. Now you think about this. We know as Christians that gods are made up, right? So they form these gods to allow them to do the devious and wicked things that their flesh wants to do, to justify it, right? So that's the same thing we see being revealed in this action against this young girl. Any unattended female could be raped, and in the transaction that ensues, neither father nor son feel the need for apologizing for an excuse. So when we see this, the father doesn't go and for his son and apologize or try to make amends. We're going to see here in a second, he goes before Jacob and says, hey, my son loves your daughter. Make it happen. Wait, we'll get here in the next couple of verses. Let's go ahead and look at verses 5 through 7. If you think about it like that, rapes her. Can you imagine a rapist today rapes your daughter, comes to you and says, you know what? I love her. I want to marry her. That's where you can check the motions. Because let me check something else before he leaves my house, and he won't be marrying anybody. That's what comes in your mind, right? Think about that, right? I got something for you to check. Verse 5. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, now listen to the father's reaction. His sons were in the fields with his livestock. So his sons, he's up in age here. His sons are in the field. So he did nothing about it until they came home. Now, we'll keep going from here, but that could be okay in a sense if you look at it. But we don't see any response from him because we're going to see something from his sons. Then Shechem's father, Hamor, went out to talk with Jacob. This is messed up. Meanwhile, Jacob's son had come from the field. As soon as they heard what had happened, as soon as they got news of what happened, they left their work and they came home, went to his father and said, what happened? They were shocked and they were furious. Did you hear any of those emotional responses from Jacob? You didn't. He just said his sons weren't there and he did nothing. Because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. So they were outraged because of what he did to their sister. And Jacob's response seems passive. Seems too passive to me. I got $2. I don't think I would have waited for anybody to show up. He does nothing until his sons return home. Now, like I said, perhaps waiting on his sons, it may seem like a wise decision. He's going to wait because, he's older and there's a lot of people. What do we make a plan together? How should we deal with this? But again, we see no emotional response. As his brothers, they were outraged, right? Total different attitude. One of the commentaries that I read says, in that culture, the brothers had a greater responsibility to protect their sister than their father. That's true, but that doesn't negate his personal response. If I knew my sons were responsible, even in that culture, you think he'd had some kind of response. But we don't see that. But we also see, unfortunately, that Jacob doesn't lead and does not give his sons wise counsel, does he? We're not told that he does. He doesn't tell them how to respond to this great offense. These young men, I don't know what their ages were, but they need some guidance. His father can see the anger in them, but yet we don't hear him given him in the wisdom. And the greatest wisdom he could have favor in your eyes. It all sounds like a joke to me. A ridiculous, sad. Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Listen to what he's saying. I will give you. You guys know what he's saying there. Buying him off. Make the price for the bride and the gift I'm going to bring as great as you like. In other words, you name the price, and I'll pay it, whatever you ask. Only give me the young woman as my wife. So, Hamor, the father of the rapist, makes a request to Jacob, the father of the victim, give Dinah to my son in marriage. Then he goes on to give several reasons why it is a great idea or even a great solution to this problem that we now have. Yeah, the problem is your son raped my daughter, so how are we going to resolve that? There's a lot easier way to resolve it than this, but here's what his ideas were. Why they should let her marry him. He gave 4 reasons. Number 1, he loves her. And I think about young ladies today. The guy says he wants something. He says, I love you. After that, it's done. He's gone. In the same way, this is kind of reversed. He does what he wants, and then he says, I love her. It's probably more like he lusts after her. The prince desires her to use her, and he just wants her. Number 2, he says, our people can intermarry. Now, intermarrying with Israel, as it's going to be known here soon, has already been changed from Judah to Israel, would be devastating for Israel. It would bring immorality. It would bring worship of pagan gods, evil and wickedness. Now think about the example we just seen. His son raped Jacob's daughter, and there seems to be no problem with it. That's what they're inviting in. This is what he's saying. Now, number 3, now he's really trying to entice them with money and finances. And not only finances, because, he's been traveling a lot. Jacob, they've traveled. They've not settled down. He says, you can settle here. He's kind of like saying, I know you've been traveling from place to place. Wouldn't it be nice just to have a permanent house here? You can stay here. We would be family. You could have a permanent home here. Number 4, you could acquire property. In other words, you can be wealthier. Jacob's wealthy, but you can gain more wealth. But think about this. God has already promised Israel the promised land. God says, I have this land for you, and I will bring you back. The reason why he's where he's at, partially, because God has led him back. He probably shouldn't be where he's at, as God called him back. But I think it was Bethel, and he's in a different place. But God has called him to the promised land. So we see all the negative things, but let's stop and look at it from the fleshly aspect. Everything that he offered them, in a sense, could be enticing. If it wasn't such a horrific thing that his son did. But in that culture, it's like, yeah, it's okay. We'll just pay you a lot of money, and we'll brush this behind us. Not only that, we'll become family. That is messed up. This whole thing is just... But this is what we love about the Bible. It shows you... One commentary said, we know this is from God because man does not reveal these wicked things. He likes to tell you the good stuff, right? He'll write in a book. He doesn't like to tell you the evil things that he does. Now, Hamor and Shechem, the father and son, they probably thought to themselves, this is a generous offer. Now, remember, from the culture they're coming from, they got no problem with what he did. They don't see anything wrong. They just realize that, they're going to have to make this right in a sense. But their manner of negotiating, the arrangement of the marriage with Dinah is basically insulting her again, adding insult to injury, right? Is that the way you put it? They're even... she's even experiencing... Can you imagine the turmoil this young girl's going through if she hears the deal that's going down? They act as if money and marriage could make her disgrace go away. Now think about that. That still happens today, doesn't it? You just throw enough money at it, it'll be all fine. So in reality, they're trying to buy him out. Let's look at the next few verses 13 through 17. So they make this offer, and really, it sounds like the brothers are the ones that are negotiating. I don't know what Jacob's doing. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons, listen to the words, replied deceitfully. You're going to see they're going to agree to it with some stipulations, but what they're doing, and by reading this verse, it's saying they may be agreeing to it, but there's some deceit behind it. They got some alternative plans. They spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. Really? Because he's circumcised? How about because he raped your sister? Listen to the next phrase. It says, that would be a disgrace to us. Now what you're going to see here is basically they're pulling in religion. Something that God gave them to solidify a covenant, to signify. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Perhaps they also think they weren't going to go for this. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. In other words, if you do this one thing, we agree with everything else that you've said. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go. Now, we look at the anger of the brothers, the deception that's going on, and I think many of us could understand the anger of the brothers. You guys could, if you think about that, if you can put yourself in that situation, can you guys sympathize with the anger they have? You can even say it's legitimate. I would say it's legitimate anger. I would be angry. I would be beyond angry. Some of us might think it may be also okay for this method of deception to return evil with evil. Many times, even as Christians, we justify that. Because of what they did, this wickedness, it justifies me returning and doing wickedness in the same way. Lying, cheating, and deceiving. But later on, as we know as Christians, in 1 Peter chapter 3, if you guys want to write that down, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, it says, it was just up there, we're so close. There you go. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessings, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit. Not only a brutal, deceptive act, but also it disgraced God's covenant of circumcision, as we just talked about. It's amazing how we bring God's name into stuff and just smear His name because of our wickedness, our revenge, our emotions. Now, surely this was a clever act of deception. You can look at it and say, well, that was a great plan. Immoral, wicked, but it worked very well. But what we see here, Simeon and Levi show themselves to be children of Jacob. Remember, his name's changed to Israel. He's still in transition. But all those years of seeing Laban and seeing his father interacting, this whole thing going on, we see this happening. From a bitter, competitive home environment. So that's what we go back to. So we are also seeing the effect between Leah and Rebekah as they've been fighting. You don't think the sons, can you imagine being Leah's sons and like, our dad doesn't care about us because he doesn't even love our mother. You think he loves us? Especially when Joseph comes along. Well, we're going to get into that soon. That's amazing. Think about that. That really does show you where they're at. Here's a great example of it. And here's the part that I put in notation. They took Dinah from Shechem's house. So the agreement went forward. As soon as they circumcised, she went to his home. 3 days. Only 3 days. Imagine what could happen within that time. But imagine being Dinah. Put yourself in her place. She may or may have not known what they were going to do. Maybe not. But think about it. She's thinking, they've given me to the very guy that raped me. I can't wrap my head around that. But again, if we can put ourselves in their place, again, when you act upon emotion, you do some things that you would never do. You don't think through the effects of it. Have you noticed that with emotion? You don't think through, you just do. You act on emotion, and the end result is not good. So they took everything. They took revenge, and I'm sure they felt they had the right to do what they did. They killed everyone, and they took all the women, the children, the livestock, everything. They decimated this city and they pillaged the place. So each evil thing they did gave them more and more momentum, saying, you know what? These guys deserved it. And because they deserve it, we deserve to take all their stuff. Their women, their children, and everything. So they take one incident and then they pull it upon a whole city of people. So what does God say about revenge? Maybe they should ask this question. But we have Paul written in Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Romans 12:19 says, listen to this. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. So they left no room for revenge upon the people. Where's the revenge going to come? Perhaps upon them for their evilness? Now how does Jacob respond to this? Remember, he's been passive through the whole thing. Let's look at the last two verses. Verses 30 and 31. Listen to what he says. I mean, the words that he says. His daughter's been raped. They've done a horrific thing. All these people have been killed. And Jacob says to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, and my household will be destroyed. But they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? All we hear is, look what you've done to me. My house is in trouble because of the... He was only concerned about himself. He's not concerned for God's righteousness. He's not concerned about, the death or the plunder of the innocent people that his sons... None of that's mentioned. All he said is, you made a mess for me. They're going to come after me because of what you've done. But in this whole time, he's had an opportunity to give them wisdom and direction. What we see here is Jacob, not Israel, in action. Let me wrap this up by giving you a quote by John Corson on this. When word gets out to the other cities, he's responding to these last two verses, in the area concerning what you have done, we too will be annihilated. He's saying you annihilated them. This is when the Perizzites, all these, there's many different tribes in the Canaanite region. When the word gets out, they're going to annihilate us. Why would God take a whole chapter to tell us such a sad, sordid story? He goes on to say, it is a wise man and a wise woman who says, Lord, if you're telling us this, we better listen. So why is he telling us this? He's saying, you see, every time I have failed, every time I have erred, every time I have missed the mark, dropped the ball, stumbled about, God was faithful to warn me ahead of time. The problem was, I didn't listen. Have you noticed how God warns us and warns us? And he says, this is going to happen. And then it happens. You're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And you do what you're not supposed to do. In this case, the story we have just read serves as just such a warning to every mom and dad wise enough to understand that he who pitches his tent towards the world. Now, he's saying mom and dad, but I'm telling you what, this applies to every one of us. Husbands, wives, families. When you pitch your tent towards the world must not be surprised when his kids, we must not be surprised when our kids act like the world. The parent who says to his children, the way you're behaving, the way you're dressing, the way you're living is causing me to stink. It's almost invariably the one who has allowed his kids to go places and do things he knew in his heart were not right. For if we allow our Dinahs and Daniels to interact with the heathen, confusion in our kids and problems in our homes are sure to follow. Heed the warning so clearly given here, dear dad and precious mom. It is not legalism, it's plain old wisdom. Again, it applies to us too. And as we lead our homes, or even just being, example to others, don't pitch your tent towards the world. Don't be seeking or being that close. He's in a city that he shouldn't be. He's very right outside the city of Shechem, where he should not have been. Just like Lot. Remember what happened to Lot? He pitched his tent, and next thing you know, he's inside there. He was sitting at the city gates, which means apparently he got involved in the leadership. So that's a warning to us. See what can come from that. Doesn't mean we don't go in the world. As we're in the world, we tell them about Christ. We're to be the messengers. What is the phrase? We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. We're to go in there. We don't want to be influenced by them. By hanging out with them, evil people, wicked people, maybe your old friends. Before you became a Christian, there's some people you got to stop hanging out with because they have an influence upon you. And we're surprised when we hang out with them when we begin to act like our old selves again. So I think there's a lot in here. Even though we see Jacob, his names have been changed, his character isn't totally changed. It's really hard to say something positive about this because the whole chapter is messed up, but it gives us hope too, because we know that we struggle because we're not perfect yet. We fall back and we do stupid things that we used to do. But when we do what we haven't seen so far, maybe it's in the next chapter, is we need to repent and say, God, forgive me. I don't want to continue to act the way. That's what you brought me out of. I know better now. I'm not blind to the truth. I'm not deaf to the truth. I see the truth. I'm not deceived. I've chosen not to listen. Many times we don't listen to God because we don't like what He's telling us. Because you know what? I want to check it out. If I listen to God, I can't go out there and check out what's going on because something crazy is going on. I want to check it out. With that said, let's end with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we again thank you for this time again. I pray, Lord, as we continue through the book of Genesis, you continue to give us wisdom, direction. Everyone that's here tonight, Lord, I pray, Lord, and those that are listening and watching, that you would just mature and grow them and equip them, bless them. Just encourage them to be that example. Encourage them to seek your wisdom. I pray, Lord, that you help us control our emotions and not let our emotions control us so that we can truly represent you. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.